Okay, we're going to try this and we're going to see what the heck happens. John, are you there? John?
I'm here.
Okay, talk a little bit more.
Hey, Brad, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm ready to go. It's the most consequential 11:20 since KMOX.
I don't quite think that's the case. I got to do a couple little adjustments here. Hold on a minute. Okay,
Right.
do that for me, and so okay, this is something brand new with a new studio and the whole bit, and we are trying to work out the bugs even as we speak. And bugs, matter of fact, I think I may need to call Orkin because we've got quite a few bugs in here, but that's a whole other story. Okay, so I am Brad Hildebrand. That is John Combest, correct?
Good morning. Good morning. I am John Combest.
And John is like the political, what do you say? You call yourself the political provocateur? Is that what you're saying?
It's much better than insider or outsider or lobbyist or campaign guy or whatever. Provocateur is good.
Isn't that?
I provoke people.
Isn't that what was the guy on Donnybrook?
Martin Dugan at Donnybrook.
Yes, isn't that what he called himself?
His title was, and that was an homage. It's an homage to Martin Dugan.
So, and Martin is unfortunately no longer with us, correct?
Right, that's correct.
And he did, if you know what we're talking about, is that show still on?
It is technically still on. I think they have a, in the 1980s, the Cardinals had what they called the bullpen by committee.
Yeah.
Where just whatever they needed at any given moment, they grab somebody out of the bullpen to pitch.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's what Donnybrook is today. But technically, I believe it's still on the air. And they've had a rotating host of cast of seat warmers on that show since Martin left.
Now, is Ray Hartmann still there?
I believe he still does. I know he doesn't do his show on St. Louis's KTRS anymore, but I believe he's on there.
Do you know, I've met him a few times, and I have to tell you, sometimes you see things that and you experience things from other people that you live through somewhat vicariously. He's been always an interesting entrepreneur with what he started the Riverfront Times, wasn't that his deal?
Yep, and then sold it.
Right. He declared bankruptcy a couple years ago. Did you know that?
He did, yeah. And in the write-up that talks about the end of his show, Ray acknowledges that and talks a little bit about, some of the financial difficulties. Well, I have a quick Ray Hartmann story.
Well, hold that for a minute because I do want to hear it. But he bought St. Louis Magazine, and somebody told me that, and he also bought a magazine that came along with it, which was like a home decor, interior designer kind of magazine.
Yeah, they had like some kind of a sister publication, I think.
Right. Was that what his undoing was?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's what it was or not. I don't know. I mean, I do know that you're right. I mean, he invested in that magazine, and then I'm not sure what happened. If you remember, there was a period of time in the mid 2000s where St. Louis had St. Louis Magazine was super popular. There was a magazine called Alive Magazine.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And everywhere you went, people were talking about these. They had the local paparazzi shots.
Right.
And it was really the hip in crowd was into these magazines, and you just don't. The only time I see a St. Louis Magazine anymore is if I'm waiting at a doctor's office.
Well, once again, isn't that sort of the what do you say, fallout from the internet? I mean,
absolutely.
Because
so if it was 2003, and you like to look at attractive young couples, or let's say specifically attractive young women or attractive young men, whatever you're into, you could pick up the new Alive Magazine or St. Louis Magazine and see what all the beautiful people in St. Louis are doing. And now you open Instagram.
That's what you do now. Well, I'm still. You know what? I told you to hold off a minute. Give me the Ray Hartmann story, and then I'll tell you my old school ways. Okay?
Yeah. Excuse me. I'll give you the quick story. So back in 2008, I was asked to come on Donnybrook. This is when Martin was still around, and they had an election night special, and it was awesome. And I grew up watching Donnybrook with my parents, and I was able to have my dad actually watch the live stream. My mom had already passed, but my dad was able to watch the live stream. I was really proud of that. And it was so funny because my dad couldn't stand watching Ray Hartmann on TV and would always talk back to Ray Hartmann. And Ray Hartmann couldn't have been kinder and couldn't have been more complimentary and frankly flattering to me. And it was so disappointing that I had to tell my dad that Ray Hartmann actually seemed like a really good guy. Like I broke my dad's heart with that news. So Ray's always been cool with me. It was a shame to see him go from KTRS.
Well, it's so Ray was nice to you on the show? Was that?
Well, I don't know about on the show. Like I remember there was a governor's race that year, but prior to the show, just a really kind man. And then over the years when he would have if I would write something, I would get some feedback from Ray, or if Ray wrote a column, Ray would always send me a link to his column. So yeah, he's always been good with me in my book.
Did your dad go with you when you were on the show? Is that how you?
No, my dad was actually visiting my sister out of town.
Oh, okay.
So my dad didn't get a chance to go, but he was able to watch the live stream.
Would he have wanted to go?
Yeah, probably.
And
we went to they did, again, when Martin was still around, they did Donnybrook Live or Donnybrook in person. They had something like that, and it was a huge in-person event, and tickets were probably priced a little bit too high for a nonprofit fundraiser, but my dad and I went anyway and got a chance to watch. We didn't talk to Martin or any of the folks that night.
Okay.
But, it was, it's one of those tearjerker things that I grew up watching it with my parents, and to be honored to be asked to be on the show was really cool.
You just said something. The tickets were too high for a nonprofit event. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, amplify on that a little bit, because see, you and I are either fortunately or unfortunately through the course of this show are going to get to know each other, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have a problem with non-for-profits. I really do. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I see first off, they don't pay any taxes. Okay. And they don't pay real estate taxes. And in our industry, the not-for-profits, the God Squad operators, the religious stations, they don't pay any fees. And all the rest of us broadcasters pay fees, which keeps going higher and higher and higher. If we have to file a modification to adjust our, put a different antenna up, we have to file an application with the FCC, and we have to send along a fee.
Brad is living through that. Brad is living through it right now, aren't you?
Right.
I mean, you're going through that paperwork now.
The
interesting thing, and my favorite response from public radio people is when they say that they don't directly get taxpayer money.
Which is BS.
Which is technically true, because it's funded through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which then gives money to your local St. Louis Public Radio and others.
Yeah, but
so when they say they don't directly receive taxpayer money, it's correct. They get it through an intermediary, but they still get taxpayer money.
Well, that's not even true, because of the fact they're all employees of the University of Missouri system here in St. Louis.
Well, yeah, you're right. So Brad's right. In the case of St. Louis Public Radio, you're absolutely right, Brad. They are employees there. But other NPR stations use that additional layer as a rationalization for why they don't directly receive taxpayer subsidies.
Well, you and I could talk about this all day long, because what's interesting about it is I do listen a lot to NPR. Matter of fact, the interview I did with you earlier, where I threw out, you were throwing out the NGO, and I go, whoa, hold, explain what an NGO was, and I even said to you, I said, they use that term all the time on NPR, and you were like, I don't listen to NPR. What I find, like, for example, they have some very interesting programming that I really, really, really enjoy. They've got a thing called, have you ever listened to Planet Money?
Yeah, I was featured on Planet Money. I'm a big fan of Planet Money.
You're not a big fan of Planet Money?
No, I said I am.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that kind of programming is really interesting. But my problem is, and I'm going to get myself in trouble for saying this, that you know what a drinking game is, right? If you're going to watch TV, and
I allegedly participated in many in college.
Right, and there's a key word or a phrase or something that every time it's being said, you take a drink, right? You could get drunk in about 30 minutes on any usual day of NPR when they talk about anything to do with sex, because every guest on NPR is at some point in time, and we're talking with Joe Smith, who's got his new book out, and then Joe's, all right. And by the way, Joe is transsexual. And go, okay.
Right.
And it's like, can you get any straight people on this radio station? Can you get anybody who's just like a normal Joe, so to speak? But anyway, okay. I'm going off on tangents. You'll notice that about me. Okay. So, going back to and you know what? If we're going to try to do this show the way we're going to do it, and I've got you for the whole hour, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do the breaks because I still haven't formatted this. This is inside baseball kind of stuff. Anyway, I'll worry about that in a minute. Yesterday, listening to NPR, they had some really interesting shows on. And one of them was, which is sort of a crazy story about, this was, I think, on Planet Money or on Radio Lab or something like that, a guy who got the California license plate Null, N-U-L-L, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
And the whole show was about the word null because are you familiar with the usage of null in computer programming?
Yeah, so doesn't that cancel out any sort of...
Well, yes. So what happens was they said there's a certain way when you write code that if you put null, and I'm not a coder, but I think this is how they explain it, that when you write null and you put null in parentheses, and null is essentially a programming language, which essentially, like you said, means nothing. In other words, it's not a zero, it's just empty space. Yeah. If you look at a spreadsheet, like for example, if you look at a Excel spreadsheet and you go through the cells, if a cell has nothing in it, no formatting, no numbers, no punctuation, that essentially is a null cell. Well, they started off the show by talking about this guy who got the license plate. He applied for the California license plate because he was a computer programmer of Null. And over the course of like several months, he got thousands and thousands of parking tickets mailed to his house, okay? And because of the fact that in computer language, if there was no license plate entered, like let's say it was an abandoned car and they put a parking ticket on the car, that when it went through the computer system, it was him because he was null.
Interesting.
And then they went through the thing with these people whose their last name was Null, and they had like 4 or 5 people who told the exact same story about getting, I think the one guy one day got like, it was like crazy. He got a notice from the post office that he had 20,000 pieces of mail. And it was from some computer or some company that had mailed out a bunch of statements. And if there was anything to do with Null, it ended up being mailed to him. You know, and see, once again, that's the kind of thing like on NPR that I really enjoy. But, you being the political provocateur, they're about as left as you can get. And let's be honest, I think if you went over to KWMU today, St. Louis Public Radio, and you injected everybody with sodium pentothal, I don't think you'd find anybody who voted for Trump. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think it would be very rare. First of all, they wouldn't admit it, and they couldn't be free to admit it in that environment. I wrote back in August, I wrote a column for the Missouri Times called How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Media. And I talked about how when you look more deeply at something like St. Louis Public Radio, in their very specific case, they have a diversity ceiling. So if you're a white man, the chances that you'll be promoted through, if you're a straight white man, the chances that you'll be promoted through the ranks based on data is very slim. And so they have an outstanding reporter there, Jason Rosenbaum, who was passed over for 2 promotions in favor of folks who check multiple diversity boxes. Now, after writing that column and publishing that column in August, last month, Jason was awarded, finally, his own show, The Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis Public Radio. So there is still quality reporting going on at St. Louis Public Radio, but it's through Jason.
But see, I could turn this into a whole show. I'll tell you what, we got to take a break. We got to pay some bills here. You're listening to. Do I dare say this?
Say it.
Hold on.
They'll love it.
Where am I at? Hold on, I got to see where I'm at. Okay, hold on a minute. Okay, I'm right here. Okay, you're listening to the maiden voyage of. And should we even say what the name of the show is going to be?
Well, it's the Brad and John Show, right?
The Brad and John Show.
That's the official name.
That is, and it would be John and Brad. If your name was Brad, you'd be first, but I just took the lead role because it's B and J.
Absolutely, it's your show, and you know Eggburt, and I don't know Eggburt.
I know Eggburt very well. You're listening to the inaugural run of this as we slowly transition this radio station into something that it hasn't been. If you've been listening for a while as a podcaster, if you've been listening for the past couple of weeks, we have an interesting lineup of talk show hosts at 8 o'clock. We have Armstrong and Getty from noon. They go till to noon. From noon to 3, Eric Erickson. And then from 3 to 6, we have Markley, Van Camp, and Robbins, which is 3 dudes sitting around. What's interesting about it is they're 3 different generations. Do you know this about these 3 guys?
I didn't know that. No, I didn't realize that.
One guy is like a boomer. One guy is like a millennial, and one I think is one guy is an X. I think he was born in like 84 or something like that. So you got like a guy, I believe, and Scott Robbins is the older gentleman in the show. Scott Robbins once upon a time spent, I think, 6 months in the hospital. He had 2 near fatal heart attacks, like I think the same day, and almost died, and now he's made this miraculous recovery. So they do the show where it's like 3 generations, and what I love about it is it's sort of like going to the bar and hearing, and sitting at the bar and having 3 guys next to you that are friends and sort of eavesdropping on what they're talking about, because they do talk politics, but they talk all sorts of crazy stuff. Anyway, that's coming up today. So John and I are going to be the morning show, although John's only going to be on for an hour, right?
That's right. We'll do 7 to 8 o'clock.
Right, 7, 8 o'clock. So I still don't know what we're going to do between 6 and 7. I haven't figured that out yet. I'll have the meeting with Eggburt, and we'll talk about that. So we're going to take a break at 7:25.